Greetings, fellow thinkers and drinkers, for this fourth installment. Now look at the recorded works of UFO. Okay, we left them last time after the conclusion of the Making Contact tour, after which basically the band fell apart. Phil Mogg, the only remaining founder member at this point, apparently drifted to Los Angeles, where he eventually made the acquaintance of Japanese-American guitarist Tommy McClendon, perhaps better known as Atomic Tommy M. And if you can use that, why wouldn't you? I presume for, career-based commercial reasons, hard-nosed business sense as much as anything. It was obvious to Mogg that, the UFO name is going to carry more weight, than the Phil Mogg project or whatever. And whether he ever considered joining any other band or anything, whether there were any offers, I just don't know. And it's not really the point. But effectively, rather than retire the name, he decided to rebuild UFO. So he now had Atomic Tommy. Brought back, shall we say, Paul Gray, who had filled in for, had replaced, Pete Way on the last tour. Paul Raymond returned, and they acquired the drummer Robbie France, I believe was his name. Chrysalis Records, who had been putting out their stuff thus far, I think from the time Schenker first joined the band, showed some faith in them, and signed, I think, effectively renewed UFO's contract on the strength of the new album. Seasoned producer Nick Tauber was handed the production reins. But before recording began, France disappeared. I don't know why, and he was replaced on the drum stool by Jim Simpson, ex of British rockers Magnum. After they recorded and the tour got underway, Paul Raymond also departed again, and they had to finish the tour with David Jacobson, I believe his name was, on keyboards. Okay, getting slightly ahead of ourselves, but that's the background to this first album we're going to discuss today, recorded and released in 1985 and titled Misdemeanour. Okay, it opens up with a song, This Time, which is a decent upbeat opener, but it's very glossy sounding, mid-80s AOR rather than classic UFO, one has to say. The chorus still undeniably catchy. They always were, weren't they? That's one of the, it's one of the defining features of their songwriting. And Phil Mogg is certainly still in good voice. However, overall it's sheen, too much sheen, right down, very keyboard heavy, very bright drum sound that one associates with these things. It's, I suppose lacks bottom end, but it lacks it's just too polished. And I'm afraid this has something of a generic feel to it. It's solid, it's well recorded, it's well performed. It's not a bad song by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm afraid this is too soft rock UFO for my taste. Okay, the second track, One Heart. It should be obvious by now, I think, the direction of travel here. The mid-80s polish, shall we say, second song in is already becoming overbearing. I guess they're going for some emotional weight, but they don't get there. Whatever virtues the song had, in its arrangement and construction, it is utterly smothered under layers of synth and very clean-sounding guitar textures. So Atomic Tommy actually plays quite well. Production doesn't do him any favors. Yes, if you listen, this is still UFO somewhere buried in there. On the other hand, this could be one of far too many generic soft rock nobodies of the period. Okay, next up, Night Run, which is thankfully a much stronger track. Got a groove to it, a nice groove to it. The riff feels purposeful, and chorus is one of the strongest and most memorable on the record. Almost anthemic. So when I say almost, it's all relative, and I'm relating it to the rest of the album. First time I've heard, you could say, okay, maybe this lineup has got something to offer. They're finding their feet a little bit. It's sleek, it's energetic, it's commercial, but it manages to be convincing. Okay, The Only Ones. Okay, it's a slower, more reflective piece. It goes for atmosphere, but it doesn't achieve one. It's pleasant background listening. It's it's not something one's traditionally looked for when listening to UFO, and I'm not about to start now. Really good vocal from Morg on it, I have to say. But yeah, I'm sorry, this is filler. It really is. It's filler of its time. It's generic pop, and it's just utterly weighed down by the era's obligatory keyboard pads. I mean, it really is. Sorry, doesn't work. Mean Streets, however, this is the closest they're going to get, I think, on this album, not to prejudge the rest of it, but, to the grit and classic swagger that we associate with UFO. Guitar work is far more, noticeably more aggressive on this one. Tempo is livelier, most certainly. Yes, and okay, it is polished for radio consumption, there's no two ways about it. It's not vintage UFO by any stretch of the imagination, but it does inject some much-needed edge and some venom, if you like, into the middle section of this album. And again, I have to say, some really nice work from Atomic Tommy M. Okay, Name of Love. It's more mid-tempo. It does have a strong chorus, I'll admit, but the verses are utterly forgettable. It's a good hook on the choruses, but it carries no real emotional punch, or it's just musically a bit vapid, a bit vacuous. Yeah, I don't know. It's competent. I'm sure you could put this up against, some other music by other bands and say, wow, isn't it good? In comparison, it might be, but I'm sorry. It's not an essential song. All right, okay. We move on to Blue, which is undoubtedly one of the absolute standout tracks on this album. Despite being one of its most melodic moments, it does, I have to say, lean strongly into AOR territory. But it does so with far more finesse than the majority of the other tracks to be found on Misdemeanour. I suppose the strength lies in its tunefulness, its warm flowing melody. There's a genuinely affecting chorus, I have to say. It really works well. And again, some very tasteful playing from Atomic Tommy M. Much more restrained and musical on this than he has been thus far, but what he does very well. Okay, Phil Mogg delivers, doesn't he always? It captures the mood, I suppose. Doesn't push too hard on it. Again, it's very glossy, though, isn't it? It's got that 80s AOR sheen still. And I think there's a better song in there somewhere. It may not be classic 70s or early 80s UFO, but it's one of the more successful and endearing tracks, and perhaps even enduring tracks on the album. Okay, Dream the Dream, the power ballad. Oh, how I've waited to utter those words. Well, this is a strange little thing. It's a curious mix of ambition and excessive gloss. There are good ideas. There really are. And it's the melodic sense of the song, or foundation of the song, is intact. You can follow it, you can hear it, it makes sense. But the arrangement, though, it just collapses under the weight of 80s studio decor and excess of decor. It is not a bad song. Or there's a good song in there, but it's wow. No, I mean, yeah, it is absolutely whatever virtues it had, completely submerged by the keyboards and the effects. I'm afraid we're just all too typical of the time, and one's starting to get the feeling that this is not coincidental. Okay, Heaven's Gate. At least they're trying something a bit more interesting here. It does aim almost for an anthem-type status, perhaps. But it doesn't get there, does it? And it stumbles under theatricality, I would have to say. Strong melody here. Good vocal, delivered with conviction. But there's just too many sweeping keyboards here that are doing the best to give the impression of mood. But they don't. Things that the band would used to be able to do, genuinely achieve within the music, the construction, the chords progressions, the gaps they left in the music to let things breathe real emotion and real musical dynamic, has been replaced with keyboards, sweeping keyboards. It's not done at a bad pace. Has that going for it, and it's got that radio-friendly sort of almost stadium rock finish to it, but it all feels calculated rather than earned. It all, it doesn't feel organic. It's not terrible. I cannot say it is terrible, but I can't say it's good either. I would say it's generic. Okay, the album closes with Reckless, which is certainly one of the more energetic moments on offer. Punchy. Despite a slow start, it morphs into a nice punchy, strong riff. Very taut rhythm sections, and it's only now that you hear it that you realize how much you've been missing that on the rest of the album. And it does recall the band's harder edge. The songwriting here is more direct, and it's much more immediate. And again, I have to say, Atomic Tommy does some stuff on here that obviously demonstrate that he can do better than what we've had on the rest of the album, and one assumes, as the actor always says when he gave a bad performance, well, I simply did what the director told me. You have to think he was working under instruction here. For the few times he gets to express himself, he does it very bloody well. And especially on this song, you think he's capable of writing, or at least helping to write much stronger, more authentic material. Again, unfortunately, the production choices, they just round the corners of this song off far too much. It becomes too smooth. But the song itself is, for this album at least, a successful piece of straight-ahead rock. And that was that. Well, as Nick Tauber's production, I think I've said all I need to say, but it is most certainly rooted in mid-80s radio rock. It's bright, it's synthetic, and it's relentlessly polished. And as I've said on occasion, where there has been some good musical ideas, it has conspired to vary them. Drums are heavily processed, the keyboards are thickly layered, and the guitars are too clean, and they don't sit high enough in the mix. The overall effect, therefore, is a professional but sanitized recording. And whatever grit and character that some of these songs may have had, well, yeah, doesn't really come through. Now, one has to assume, given that this was the mid-80s, and given that the UFO were not exactly riding high at the time, that there was an element of deliberate choice behind this. Get some MTV airplay, etc., etc. Well, it didn't work, did it? It received mixed reviews upon release. I mean, they're still playing well. They're still good musicians. And Mog's still singing really well. And I think that got noticed. But they're chasing trends here. They're chasing fashion rather than being themselves. And so they're not doing it particularly successfully. Unfortunate. Commercially, it was a modest seller. Far below what they'd been used to. And again, yeah, can you say? Although, I must be honest, I do not dislike it. Although it is not the UFO album I reach for that often. But I played it a couple of times again in preparation for this, and I stand by all my comments on it. But it was certainly one of the weaker entries on in the catalog, I'd have to say. But I can't bring myself to dislike it. For there is credible stuff on it, and there are a couple of good songs, and even the ones I don't like, they're not offensive. It's just too commercial. They've crossed the line here, at least from my point of view. If you accept that, at least from my point of view, that they reached even their melodic zenith on mechanics, that even making contact was a step too far, well, this has gone even further. Yeah. There you have it. Well, after that, we'd have to wait for 1988 until we heard from them again, at least in terms of recorded output. Well, they released an EP. Does anybody remember those? Yeah. Called Ain't Misbehavin. I don't know why they hadn't written or recorded another album. I'm afraid I either never knew or I can't remember exactly what was going on with the band. But and maybe they just brought this out to remind the world that they were still alive. But it is effectively, it's still the same lineup. It's still Phil Mogg, Atomic Tommy, Paul Gray, Jim Simpson. Paul Raymond having, as I mentioned earlier, departed. It was recorded in 87, released in 88, produced by Neil Levine. I don't know too much about, but it's got a leaner, more straightforward sound than its very, very glossy predecessor, which is reflective more of the material. It wasn't, I don't think, intended as a major release. I might have... I think I've already alluded to it. Why did they reach it? Why did people used to release LPs, EPs? Was it a stopgap, or they had a couple of good songs that didn't make the album and they thought they were too good to keep in the can? I don't know. Not that it matters. This is a historical review. Okay, it opens up with Between a Rock and a Hard Place, which is a punchy, straight-ahead opener. And it immediately signals a tougher approach than was to be found on Misdemeanour. The riffing is much more muscular, the production a little drier, a little harsher, a little dirtier. Everybody sounds good on it. Song itself is fairly simple, but its direct energy, is good. It's a good song, and certainly nothing this good appeared on Misdemeanour. Okay, another Saturday Night. It's another lively, upbeat rocker. Very strong chorus and a good sense of fun about it, this one. This time the guitars bring a real welcome, has a real swagger about it. It's still occasionally drifts towards formula, perhaps a little formulaic in its construction, perhaps. It's catchy, it's unpretentious. It's fine, it works. Sounds a little bit more like it could have been on Mechanics rather than on Misdemeanour, but perhaps not good enough to have been on Mechanics, if you take my meaning. Okay, At War with the World, more atmospheric moments here. Verses build tension effectively. Mogg's phrasing does add bite to this. Chorus never quite delivers the lift it promises, where the UFO used to be so good, even with relatively simply constructed songs, at getting just that swing into the melody, as it were, just to give it that lift, without layering it, with keyboards. They used to be able to do it naturally, as it were. And here they don't quite get to it somehow. I don't know. There's something in the construction of it doesn't quite work. Solid track. But it feels like it's missing something, a melodic idea or something. I don't know. It's missing something. Okay, Hunger in the Night. It's another fairly straightforward rocker, up tempo, but melodic still. Yes, yeah. It's a good, what a trope. It's a good album track. Is that just a polite way of saying it's bollocks? Well, it's not bollocks. But it's a good album track. It's not outstanding. It's got great playing on it, great singing on it, as always. Guitar playing on it, I think, is very strong. So a really good solo on this one, a really noticeably good solo. Over repetition of the chorus does not do it too many favors. And every time you hear that, at least I tend to think unfinished. It's needed more work. I hate it when bands on songs like keep repeating the chorus ad infinitum. Check my video on Iron Maiden if you want more proof of that. It's compelling enough, but it's still a little generic, I have to say. All right, Easy Money, which is again pleasant. Pleasantly, it's another no-nonsense hard rocker built around a simple riff and a nice straightforward hook. It's energetic, it's functional, but it's not especially memorable. I'm saying that it sounds like they're writing better songs than they did on the last album. Well, they're making an effort to write better songs. And I think they are actually better, but they're not great songs, I'm afraid. It doesn't have much nuance to it. I said it's fairly straight up and down. But it's got drive to it. It's not essential, but it's not bad. Okay, Rock Boys Rock, with boys being spelled with a Z. Is by far the weakest track on this album. And I think the title tells you just about all you need to know about it. This is generic rock and roll romp that feels dated even by the standards of 1988. Yes, okay, they play well on it, but the songwriting is just not there. It's a little vacuous. It's close to being filler. Although I have to say, if nobody's listening, it's a lot of fun, and given the right mood, a bit of a guilty pleasure. Okay, they wrap things up with Lonely Cities of the Heart. It's the most melodic and emotionally developed song. Because of that, certainly easily Moog's best vocal on it. And it's actually got a good arrangement to it. It sounds like they've put some time and effort and thought into it. It's still very much of its time, but it supports the mood of the song rather than smothering it. I think would be the important difference I would highlight. It's a strong closing track. I do kind of like it. It hints at a more mature direction that this band never, unfortunately, fully explored. And that was that. I suppose if nothing else, it was a slight improvement over Misdemeanour. And there are more than enough hints on this to show that this particular lineup still had a future and was not dead as a creative force. And as I said, musically, yes, moving in the right direction, and I cannot say I dislike it. It does not compare to their best work, no, but this is the period of the mid to late 80s, early 90s. They were in the doldrums at the time, and this is perhaps reflective of that. And again, no surprise to anybody. This did little to reverse their decline, as it were, or improve their fortunes as a band. It was a difficult period. As I said, this period of the band we're discussing now. It's only 3 albums in it, but it covers from from 84 to effectively 94. Covers a period where the band were not doing too much, and they'd fallen from grace. But suppose they had to some extent. Well, internal tensions within this lineup. Uh, Financial strains, no doubt. And maybe just simple exhaustion. I don't know. Everything seemed to take their toll, and by the end of 1988, that was that. There was no significant commercial upturn, and it was not on the horizon. And the lineup collapsed. Morg walked away. Atomic Tommy, who I think has proven himself on this to be an excellent player, a no mean songwriter. And if you want further evidence of that, there's a lot of live stuff on YouTube with UFO around this time. And they do an interesting new arrangement, let's say, of Only You Can Rock Me, but much better, much more convincing, the whole band, but especially Atomic Tommy. You watch them live. They did have it. It's just not reflected in their studio output, unfortunately. And that was to be that, for a while at least. Okay, sometime 1992, Morg reconnected with Pete Way. It's been 4 years since their last recorded output. But this time, they acquired Lawrence Archer on guitar, Clive Edwards on drums, and for the recording, Don Airy played on keyboards. It should be one of those, party questions, shouldn't it? It's like, okay, name an album from, this period in the, 80s to the early 90s or whatever, that Don Airy did not play the keyboards on. That's the question. And some backing vocals were actually provided by Terry Reid and Stevie Langer. Kit Wolven was given the production duties, and they recorded it in the UK, I believe. And it was a return to the more guitar-driven. Notice there's not a keyboard player even listed as a part of the band at this stage. I think it's probably fairly obvious why they got back together. It would have been business, commercial reasons. And I think Pete and Phil always got on. There was never any personality clashes involving them, and they've been a very good combination, I have to think, writing combination. And it was probably obvious that, the UFO name still carried more weight than either of them individually. And Lawrence Archer, no mean guitar player, as we are about to see. The album opens with Borderline, and it's a real potent opening. Gritty, guitar-driven, raw edge. It's great to hear, actually. Compared to the last few albums, this is a raw-sounding record in many ways. The riffing is muscular. It's a return to their hard rock roots. The rhythm section is solid. It drives the song along well. Morg's voice still carries authority. This is a really great song and a strong reintroductory statement if you want. Moves on to Prime for Time, perhaps more blues-orientated or groove-orientated, say. Tracks on the album, slightly slower compared to the opener. Suits the song, certainly. It's really catchy. And Archer is really prominent on this one and plays damn well, I have to say. It's a good follow-up song. So far, so good. Okay, She's the One, which is shorter, concise, melody-driven rocker, more restrained than the first two, with a hook that just absolutely works. This was the single, I believe. No, it wasn't. It sounds like it could have been, but it wasn't. It wasn't. Everything just works on this. This is what we, at least I, have always liked about the band, the ability to melodic but still driving hard rock songs. And this is just an excellent example of it. Okay, Ain't Life Sweet up next. Slightly more bluesy, I suppose. Not necessarily something I like, but they get away with it here because it's got a great rock groove to it. More excellent guitar work. Steady rhythm, everything works well together. Great attitude to this one. Great chorus, great hook, great little song. I Don't Want to Lose You, perhaps the longest composition. It allows for a little bit more development. Perhaps the most ambitious arrangement on the album, I'd have to say. Blends what we've become used to as their melodic rock sensibilities with a heavier hard rock backbone, put it that way. It's very well constructed, and yet at the same time instantly accessible. It's just a damn fine song. Not too much more to say. Really impressive. Okay, Burning Fire is it's a muscular riff heavy track, I suppose. Driving beats, and it's got a certain urgency to it. It's very good. It's another very instantly recognizable, catchy song. Great hook to it, nice chorus. It's not the best composition on the album, I have to say. But by no means does it let the side down. We're not talking filler territory or anything like that. No. It's just perhaps not quite where the level of some of the other things. And I have to say the same thing for the next song, Running Up the Highway, which is, again, a decent, energetic rocker. It does remind one of their more groove-orientated rocking moments from yesteryear. It's engaging riffing, it's tight, rhythmically tight, great vocals, great vocal melody, everything done with absolute conviction. But it's just not that great of a song. There's better stuff on here. A little basic, perhaps a little unrefined. Perhaps they could have done slightly more with it. I don't dislike it. Okay, Backdoor Man up next, which is a change of pace and mood. This is the most obviously blues-influenced song, and it leads into that typical blues groove. Archer is really good on this, I have to say. Well, so is everybody else, but it slows things down as the blues tracks tend to do, and it does give the guitarist room to express himself, etc. It's just too traditional blues for my taste, and I have to say it does drag a bit. Always been my least favorite song on the album, and it remains. Okay, One of Those Nights. Now, this was the single. I said earlier it was She's the One. I was wrong. And it's obvious why when you listen to it. Very melodic, very accessible track. It's got that sing-along quality that, that chorus instantly grabbed you, that hook that instantly grabs you. And something they just do so damn well. And just because it's a single does not mean it's a lesser song. It isn't. It's an equally well-constructed song. It's just that they've emphasized, those softer sides. But this is not a soft song. This would have sounded like something Black Sabbath composed if this had been on Misdemeanour. I exaggerate, but I'm just trying to make a point. And by the way, it's a great song. All right, we're heading for the home straight with Revolution, which is a bit heavier, angrier, perhaps harder edge, certain to it, bit more jagged in construction, perhaps doesn't flow as smooth. There's a certain urgency to it. It's a reminder that the band still can rock hard. There's nothing out on this album that you would say is out and right metal or anything like that. Rarely was. I mean, you can perhaps go back and make an argument for Rock Bottom or something like that, or Doctor, but no. This is very, hard rock and roll orientated record. But there's a definite sort of sense of a little bit of menace on this one. Perhaps the heaviest song on the album. Okay, Love Deadly Love, another great upbeat rock song. Very melodic, but some good heavy riffing on it as well. And a great tempo to it. It really rattles along. Another very superb top line from Phil. Another great, more great hooks, and another very strong chorus. And it closes out with Let the Good Times Roll, which is a looser construction, I think. A very spirited song. Good closer, perhaps. Not at all pretentious, but it's upbeat and it certainly has its own swagger to it. Yeah, again, we're talking the same sort of thing here. This is, hard rock, with that sort of rock and roll influence in it. There's nothing, if we look back at this album, there's nothing progressive about this. They're not breaking new territory or, anything like that. But within the scope of what they're doing it very bloody well. And that was that. And I have to say, I've loved this album since the first time I heard it. I know not many have heard it, but I can't go on to say it's a band classic because it's not, but it's certainly, of the three we've discussed in this video, it is head and shoulders the best, and by a considerable margin, the strongest collection of songs, and really great playing on it. They should have called the album Infectious, because that is exactly what it is. Maybe apart from the blues dirge of Backdoor Man. There's not a weak moment on this. Nothing that doesn't engage the listener. Production is fairly basic, but it's clean. Guitar driven, everything's well balanced. Clarity is given to all the instruments. It's clear, it's loud enough, but it is devoid of that over-polished gloss that I found so offensive on Misdemeanour. And I think it's one of their strongest mid-period efforts, if truth be told. Excellent playing, and it is a bloody good lineup, I have to say. And one has to say, give credit to Lawrence Archer, who's all over this. He really is, and he's playing. His songwriting, he's playing, everything is top notch on this. It really is. It's really worth listening to. It's rich. It's strong. Memorable songs. It demonstrates a great sense of melody that they hadn't lost, which does hark back in some ways to the band at their prime. I caught them live on this tour, actually, and it was one of those evenings where there was some technical malfunction or something, and I remember, Phil Mogg, got to be one of the most laid-back guys, and somebody else was farting around trying to, I don't know, get an amp to work. I really can't remember, but he was engaging with the crowd. He said, "Oh, fuck it." He said, "All right, are you almost ready yet talking?" I said, "All right, what do you want to hear?" And we were shouting out, play this, play that. All right, we'll do that one. And I don't know if they did anything radically different from what they were going to play. I can't remember, but it was quite a memorable evening. And despite the difficulties, they played a really good show. And it's just nice to see somebody as could be so relaxed in a situation like that, and they just dealt with it. Memorable show. And if you want any evidence about their abilities as a live band, I think the reissue of the CD comes with a second disc now, doesn't it? Live in Tokyo. Listen to it. They were a fucking good live band. They really were. It's not just my aging memory. They were a fucking good live band. Well, that was, again, unfortunately, this was to be their one and only effort together. And I'm sorry to say that despite the quality of the album, it went largely unnoticed commercially. But this was 1992. This type of music was not selling. This was grunge, in all its hideousness. I was about to say hideous glory, but no, let's just stick to hideousness. No, this was, and even if their name had been bigger at the time, this was not music of the time, no matter what other qualities it may have. However, it did succeed in something. It did succeed in renewing sufficient interest in the name of UFO, which was going to pave the way for what was about to happen next. But for that, you're going to have to wait until next time. Well, again, there we have it. An often unheralded period in the band's career. Not the greatest by any stretch of the imagination. I wax lyrical about High Stakes and Dangerous Men. I will stick to that. Others may feel differently about it, especially about Misdemeanour and Ain't Misbehavin. Feel free to let me know. Feel free to like, to subscribe, to share, and obviously to comment. I cannot be the only person that's actually listened to these records. I know they didn't sell well, but somebody else out there's got to have an opinion on them, surely. Well, on that note, I thank you for your indulgence. I wish you well. And until next time, muscular.